Hello and welcome to another episode of the Expanse Abridged Podcast series. Today I've got chapter 32 of the first book in the series, Leviathan Wakes, which is a Miller chapter. So the last time we saw Miller and Holden, our boys, they'd just fled series, they just got out anyway. They saw Amos in the doorway with some guns. And the kind of previous saga had been them going on the spaceship with all the gang, finding the blue goo, seeing people infected by the blue goo, then turn into zombies that threw up brown goo, then getting a load of radiation and escaping. So obviously they live because we've got some books to write and stuff, and we kind of join Miller as he's waking up from his kind of recovery. It says Miller's mind reassembled slowly and with several false starts. In his dreams, he was fitting a puzzle together as the pieces kept changing shape, and each time, just as he was getting on the verge of slipping the whole mechanism together, the dream began again. The first thing he became aware of was the ache at the small of his back, then the heaviness of his arms and legs, then the nausea. The nearer he came to consciousness, the more he tried to postpone it. Imaginary fingers tried to complete the puzzle, and before he could make it all fit, his eyes opened. Then he basically wakes up, and he's got tubes all out of him, and he can't even move his arms. But that description of him waking up and then trying to wake up, trying to solve that puzzle, it fits kind of the thematic thing of Miller being the detective trying to solve things. But it's also insane foreshadowing for stuff that happens in the end of this book, books in the future, when Miller becomes kind of like an AI, but like a kind of an accompaniment to Holden, but only in his head, and he becomes like the investigator, and he appears in later books. So yeah, it's pretty cool seeing something that will be present for maybe even 8 books. I think he comes right back in the end. It kind of foreshadowed so heavily there. But anyway, yeah, he wakes up, he sees a woman, he's upset it's not Julie, it's Naomi, and he's kind of realising, wait, if there's her hair's falling down over her face, there must be gravity. It seems important, but he can't figure out why. And Naomi kind of explains he's been out 36 hours. They've got a military-grade kind of sick bay for 15 Martian soldiers, and they've used half of it, like their medicine, on Miller and the captain because of how ill they were. Miller just can't really hear anything, he's dying. He just closes his eyes. Miller closes his eyes, asleep before he could decide whether to rest, which is quite a good line. He wakes up in a bit, he throws up everywhere, goes back to sleep. When he wakes up again, realises he isn't tied down anymore, and he's got these tubes coming out of him still, and he's got a catheter the size of a pencil up his knob, which is pretty sad. And he's got no modesty, apart from a thin paper gown covering him. And his arm, because remember he got shot in the arm, Holden got shot in the calf, so his arm was covered in a big cast. And he's kind of looking around sick bay, and obviously because it's a high-end Martian, but it's also military, it looks like a ward on a high-production entertainment feed. It wasn't a hospital, it was the matte black and silver idea of what a hospital was supposed to be. And as he's kind of looking around, he sees Holden, our other boy, and as Holden looked like a ghost, his skin was pale and his sclera were red with 100 little hemorrhages. His face was puffy from steroids. Sclera, which I had to Google, is the white part of your eye, so he's got red eyes from all the radiation. They have a lovely little conversation, which Miller and Spec saying first, "Hey, we made it." Holden goes, "Yep." Miller, "That was ugly." Holden, "Yep." And then Miller passes out, because that was all the effort he had in him. And he wakes up later on, and he's doing some eavesdropping. He's dropping eaves, Samwise Gamgee. And he's listening, and he can hear Naomi and Holden talking in the background, and there's a buzz in Naomi's voice, not fear or anger, but close enough to be interesting. And he doesn't move, he stays still and listens. And Holden's kind of like, what happened on Eris? It's put a lot of things in perspective. Now that I know, I can't ignore it, I just can't pretend it's not there. And Miller's like, don't say it, you poor bastard. While Naomi's being like, Captain, please. And Holden, obviously because it is Holden, goes, "I'm in love with you, Naomi." The pause lasted no longer than a heartbeat. "No, sir, you aren't." And Holden goes straight to his plan B. He's like, "I am, I know what you're thinking. I've had a traumatic experience, I've nearly died, I'm hallucinating, but I am in love with you. And the entire time I was coming back, I could only think of you, getting back to you." To which Naomi just kind of is going to be not mean to him, but a bit of tough love. And goes, "Captain, how long have we served together?" Can I talk about it? It's been 8.5 years. How many times in that period did you fuck people? And Holden's like, maybe over a dozen, I don't know, because obviously he's a player. And she's like, okay, so it's 10 people in 4.5 years on their spaceship. When did I fall in love with you? Sorrow. That was the strain in her voice. Sorrow, disappointment, regret. Naomi says, "I can tell you the day. You were about 7 weeks into that first run. I was still smarting that some Earther had come in from out of the ecliptic and taken my exo job. I didn't like you much right at the start. You were too charming, too pretty, and too damn comfortable in my chair. And it goes on a little narrative where there's a girl who was built like a refrigerator, face like a bulldog puppy, and she had a massive crush on Holden. And they'd always play poker every night, and she would cry after the poker because she couldn't get Holden to love her. But every night Holden didn't even know about this, never led her wrong, and treated her only with respect. That was when I thought, that was when Naomi thought he would be a good kind of chief officer, and also because he's got a great arse. He's a boy, he's just got a perky little bum, and we love him for it. And she says, my point is that we flew together for 4 years and more, and I've come along with you any day if you just ask me to. And Holden's like, I didn't know. And she's like, I know you didn't ask. And you had your sights somewhere else. You were scared of belter women going after people until the Canterbury blew up and until it was just the 5 of us. It's basically, she's like, the only time you're trying to fuck me now is after 5 years and I'm the only woman left. Which is a pretty good point to raise. And they kind of talk about it, and it's like, you just go over people, then you kind of flag up. You say you'll have, it's more like lust than love, is what you're saying. So you'll go over people, they'll fuck around for a bit, they'll love each other, then the connection fades a little bit. They'll say something on the lines of professional or appropriate boundaries, and then everything just slips away. And she says, until you figure out that you don't have to love everyone you bed down with, I'm never going to know whether you love me or just want to bed down. And I won't sleep with you until you know which it is. Respect me enough for that. And then at this point, when Naomi's like, yeah, we can fuck if you want, but if you really don't want to do love, you've got to kind of commit to that. Miller starts coughing. He's been trying not to cough, but his belly went tight, his throat clamped down, and he's coughed wet and deep. And basically just starts coughing all over the floor. And in the meantime, Holden's monitor showed an elevated heart rate and blood pressure. Miller could only hope the poor bastard hadn't got an erection with the catheter still in. Naomi's like, how are you feeling? Miller goes, I felt worse, he said. Then a moment later, no, I haven't, but I'm all right. And Naomi kind of explains how bad they were, that they had to override the medical systems to stop them putting into hospice care, because they thought they were dead or no kind of estimate. And she's like, you guys will never have kids, or your swimmers will be full with 2 little heads, and you're going to have to be checked for cancers every month for the rest of your lives because of the dose they had. And I was laughing about how they barely survived. And they talk briefly about Eros. I've been saying series. I was wrong there. Eros. Anyway. And they were the last ship out, and no one's doing a rescue because there's a war on and the place is still in quarantine lockdown. Miller passes out again. He wakes up later on, and he's been on new medicine from these like special machines that inject him. And now his teeth and the nail beds of his fingers and his toes ached, and he was going between fevers and chills. He tried to imagine Julie sitting beside him the way Naomi had with Holden. It was like she'd been waiting for the invitation. Julie Mao, who he'd never really known, she raised a hand in greeting. And what about us? He asked. Do I love you? Or do I just want to love you so bad I can't tell the difference? To which Holden cock blocks and goes, yo, you're awake, I can't sleep. And they talk about the people they'd killed on the way out. And but Miller's like, you good with that? Holden's sure. Holden said, too quickly. And then Miller kind of explains when he was on series, they'd been to Eros, that's why it's called the Eros incident, that whenever they'd shot people previously, they'd always get some time off, go talk to the head shrinker, turn in our weapon. Shooting someone does something to you, killing someone, that's even worse. And they talk a bit about all the people that Miller had killed, saying it's better for them to do that than be turned to a zombie. And so all that I said back there about how you kill someone, about how leaving them alive wasn't doing them any favours. I'm sorry that happened. Holden goes, you think you were wrong? Miller, I wasn't, but I'm still sorry it happened. Which is very good Miller energy of just not apologising at all. But he turns to the killings again. So it's that part where it haunts you some. That's the way it's supposed to be. Holden was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was grey as stone. I've killed people before, you know, but there are blips in a radar track. It's not the same, is it? Miller said. No, it isn't, Holden replied. Does this go away? Sometimes, Miller thought. But he says no, not if you've still got a soul. And he turns to the conversation with Naomi and he goes, I know it's none of my business, but I really wouldn't let her put you off. So you don't understand sex and love and women just means you're born with a cock. And this girl, Naomi, she seems like she's worth putting a little effort into it. You know? Yeah, Holden said. Then, can we never talk about that again? And so then Miller kind of falls asleep again. His mind was full of dead men and Julie and love and sex. And his tubes are feeling a bit weird and he has to kind of be careful about them. And then when the blood pressure cuff fired off again, it was Julie holding him, pulling herself so close her lips brushed his ear. His eyes opened, his mind seeing both the imaginary girl and the monitors that she would have blocked if she'd really been there. "I love you too," she said, "and I will take care of you." He smiled at seeing the numbers change as his heart raced. And the chapter ends. So it's a nice one, that. It's a bit, a bit longer than some of the other ones and a bit more kind of less plot stuff. Just kind of, I understand the relationships evolving. So Miller is still refusing to admit he was wrong and not enjoys killing people, but is kind of accepting his soul's dying and imagining Julie more and more and falling in love with her. While at the same time, Holden finally confesses his love to Naomi, and she's like, "You need a bit more respect and you're just a very horny boy." Which is a really good summary, so it does kind of work. But it's a nice one there, and it sets up the gang back on the Rocinante, ready to get moving to kind of the next event and dealing with the fallout of Eros, particularly with what Protogen have been up to. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope you have a lovely week.